Could untreated ADHD be one of the reasons that people are reaching for alcohol?
We do such a terrible job of diagnosing ADHD properly. It's especially missed in women. It's missed in adults. I tend to handle bigger situations quite well. There's a fire, I'm calmly walking over there to put it out. But someone cuts me off in traffic, I'm losing my mind.
People are self-diagnosing themselves with ADHD on TikTok. What do you think about that? Jheri, studies have shown that 1 in 5 adults treated for drug and alcohol addiction also have ADHD. Could untreated ADHD be one of the reasons that people are reaching for alcohol, weed, nicotine, food, or doom scrolling just to feel normal?
Of course. Yeah, we know that untreated ADHD can cause a lot of problems because ADHDers are dopamine chasers and they're constantly looking for stimulation. Statistics show that if you have untreated or unmanaged ADHD, you are 3 to 4 times more likely to have a substance abuse problem. So this is a common problem ADHDers have. They're more prone to accidents. It's more likely they could drop out of high school, not reach their full academic potential. And it's usually because they haven't learned to manage their brain. And so their brain is constantly seeking stimulation and it's looking for dopamine. We have lower dopamine levels. So many of the clients that I work with, they do have alcohol addiction, drug addiction, even spending addiction and porn addiction, because the brain doesn't care what the addiction is. It just wants the stimulation and the dopamine.
It just wants the stimulation and the dopamine. That makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. And yes, I can very much relate to that with me personally and my journey and my own clients. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course, yeah.
So dopamine plays a huge role in ADHD brains, like you just said. Mm-hmm. How can people build healthier ways to get that hit naturally so they don't have to default to those external fixes that might lead to cycles like using alcohol?
Well, I think that it's really important that one understands their wiring. So everybody's on a different journey when it comes to ADHD. You have a lot of people who don't know that they have ADHD at all. So for example, I wasn't diagnosed until I was 40, and I have a very addictive personality, and I didn't know that I had ADHD. There's a lot of people who are self-diagnosed, and then there's, of course, people, the average age of diagnosis today is 31. So you have more adults being diagnosed today than you do children because we know so much more about ADHD. But if you suspect that you have ADHD, or if you know that you have ADHD, many people have this misunderstanding that, oh, that means that I get distracted easily or I have a hard time focusing. But it's so much bigger than that. It's emotional dysregulation. It's low dopamine levels. It's constant need for stimulation. It's feeling absolutely overwhelmed and heavy by the emotion of boredom. You know, it's like we don't want to be bored. And so when you understand your wiring, you understand what your brain craves, how to get it engaged, what your triggers are. And that's really important. Otherwise, we might just default to, I'm someone who loves to drink. I have an addictive personality. I have anger management issues. I'm not good at this thing or that thing. I'm lazy. And none of that is true if you have ADHD, because there's a big difference between your personality and your wiring. You are not your wiring. And this is why we see so many ADHDers, they struggle with self-confidence and self-esteem because from a very early age, they're getting a lot of corrective messages. So we have to undo a lot of that negative wiring, self-identity issues, just because they've heard things repeatedly. They've struggled with things repeatedly in their lives. And so whether you have ADHD or not, if you continue to put energy into things, relationships, work, career, who you are as a person, and you continue to fail and feel like you're hitting up against a wall, constant road bumps, people are disappointed in you. Even if you don't have ADHD and that's been your journey, you're probably going to turn to something to feel better, to numb out, right? But with ADHD, because we're such intense feelers, like when we're up, but when we're down, and we're doing this all the time, we're very impulsive. And so that's one of the reasons also that we're more prone to get involved in substances. So when you know this about yourself, then you can start to figure out how to fix it. But if you don't know why you're doing these things, why you feel the way that you do, you start to believe that you're broken or that something's wrong with you. And if that's a problem, if you really are broken or something really is wrong with you, then of course I'd rather just drink my sorrows away because it can't be fixed.
Wow. That was incredible. So many things you said really jumped out at me and resonated with, again, my journey and my client's journey. You are not your wiring. I love that. Someone who has struggled with alcohol in the past, I was just told once I got to that certain point where I couldn't stop and my life was truly going off the rails, I was just told I couldn't drink anymore. And that was it. I'm like, okay, it's
not very helpful.
I'm like, that's not helping me. It wasn't until I discovered more about the brain, more about neuroscience that really changed everything for me. So I truly believe that if individuals struggling with any substance or individuals with ADHD, once they get that diagnosis, once they understand that, it does take a lot of the shame away. Then they don't have to feel broken. Broken stood out to me because I truly felt broken for years.
Well, anybody with addiction does, and a large majority of people with ADHD do. I mean, because when I think of someone who feels broken, it's usually someone who's been trying and trying and trying to move forward in life, and what they're doing isn't working. And I know, as someone who has ADHD, when I was younger, I couldn't figure out why. It's like, why am I doing what other people are doing and it's not working for me the way it's working for them? I couldn't figure out why. ADHDers tend to struggle with self-appraisal, not because they're not smart, and they're actually very intuitive and they're paying attention to every little detail. So when I say that, sometimes ADHDers will say, wait a second, I do pay attention to myself. And that may be true, but we aren't always good at detecting why we keep ending up in the same patterns and how to fix it. And so that can really feel debilitating. We're doing a lot of masking. If you have ADHD, especially women are usually better at masking than men are. And so they've learned lots of different strategies, tactics, skills for blending in, for pretending, fitting in at work, fitting in relationships. But it's exhausting, and it creates a lot of imposter syndrome as well because it doesn't feel authentic. And that just contributes to more feelings of inadequacy.
Yes, exactly. It's very much a cycle.
Yes.
Like you said, not understanding those patterns, not being able to detect them, how women are masking, that makes a lot of sense to me. And it's exhausting. Oh my gosh.
It's exhausting.
Absolutely.
Yes. I mean, masking is exhausting, and anyone who's neurodivergent can identify with masking because you learn that you have to. You learn that when you say something and you blurt it out and other people kind of look at you, you learn, oh, like maybe the way I go about things or I communicate is wrong, or you don't work like other people work, or you don't follow through the same way. Your brain just doesn't operate. When you have ADHD, you have a completely different neurological system. So the way that you think about things, the way that you process information, the way that you process pain, the way that you experience people, all of it is different. It's not broken. It's not wrong. Your neurological system works quite well when you understand how to operate it. The problem is nobody's teaching ADHDers how to operate their brain. So we're in a world where this world's built for neurotypical brains. And so our brain's unique. No one's teaching us how. So our conclusion is it's broken. And again, what do you do when you feel broken? You usually turn to something to feel better.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, that was really powerful what you said, too, that the world is built for neurotypical individuals.
It's true. School,
Yeah.
usually places of employment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of expectations there about how we should behave. And ADHDers typically thrive when they can do things differently.
Yeah.
Which is why they make great entrepreneurs or do their own thing, because then they can use their own unique skills and talents, and like superpowers to do things the way they want to do them and not the way people tell them that they should be doing them.
Yes. I love that, I've heard you refer to it as superpower before. Mm-hmm. I can very much relate to that. I feel like living this alcohol-free life that I'm living, and then adding in all of these nervous system regulation skills and this emotional sobriety piece that I have been cultivating and nurturing and developing, it has made me feel like I have superpowers. So that's very relatable what you said.
Yes, I know. Online, it seems like people fall into two different categories. They either love hearing that ADHD is a superpower and they agree, like, yes, I love my ADHD. And these are people that have typically learned to overcome the parts of ADHD that are holding them back, and they've become successful entrepreneurs or they've overcome addiction. But then you have a whole huge category of people online, and it might even be a bigger pool of people that are almost offended when you call ADHD a superpower, because they really do feel as though ADHD has ruined their life. They haven't figured out yet how to overcome the addiction or the debilitating symptoms of ADHD. And I have compassion for this. If you're struggling, in lots of different ways. Usually it's in relationships and making money and just managing yourself day to day. To hear someone say ADHD is great and it's a superpower can feel frustrating. And so I'm constantly trying to put the message out there that I have been there in that place, and I'm also now here in this place. So it's not that I was more special than them. It's that I just figured out the tools. And so anybody out there who's feeling that way, whether they're suffering with addiction or they haven't been able to figure out how to take control of their brain, can get to a place, no matter how dire their situation, they can get to a place where ADHD does feel like a superpower, because there are so many gifts when it comes to ADHD, but it can be difficult to access them when the debilitating symptoms are still running your life.
Yes, exactly. I like how you framed it that way, that there are two categories. I hadn't thought of that. And yeah, it makes sense that the people that have, channeled that power for good and are using their gifts to their advantage, and then they're seeing success and they're, living the life they want to live, they do feel like it's a superpower. But, the ones who get offended, in your words, it's because they haven't made that connection yet. They haven't been able to tap in. They haven't learned yet. Which is why I'm so happy you're in the world, teaching and inspiring and educating, and really truly making a difference. So,
well, thank you. Yeah, and I think that when, I love social media and being able to be online, but I kind of have a love-hate relationship with it, because we can do so much good in the world and put so much great information out there, but people also do like to doom scroll, and there's a lot of negative information. If you're looking up ADHD, you're usually getting a lot of messaging about what's wrong with you, and it's a disorder, and here's why it makes your life hard. And even though I think it's important to have awareness to hear some of the realities of ADHD, I don't like that messaging, because whatever we put in, it's going to have to come out somehow. And so if we're constantly hearing that having ADHD is hard, it just really solidifies that in our own brain, like, what I have makes my life hard. And I just feel like I'm a testament to the fact that that doesn't have to be true. You just, you have to have the right information, the right tools, the right people in your life to figure a way out of that place. Not a way out of ADHD. Right. You never grow out of ADHD, and it doesn't have to be a negative thing, but out of that place where it's causing so much debilitation for you in your life.
Yes, exactly. And yes, you brought up more relatable points. I totally agree about social media. For me, I use it for good only. I keep it what I call a nervous system friendly place. Like, if you come to my page, thanks. It's like, I'm there to share, to inspire, to educate, not to judge, and not to put out, negativity. There is so much dysregulation out in the world, and social media is a culprit.
Definitely.
So I don't want to make it worse. And I agree about the doom scrolling. It's like, I want to use social media for good. I like to go on there and learn things and connect with people, but I'm also trying to pay attention to my own doom scrolling to make sure that I'm not. And we know that the algorithms are literally designed to push the negative messaging, and unfortunately,
it is.
how
And
it works.
it's almost like you have to do work on yourself to be able to hear all those positive things. Because if you're struggling, it's just like human nature. You want to get on and you want to find people that you relate with. But if you're struggling, then you're just listening to a bunch of other people struggling. It doesn't get you out of where you are. You know? So you have to be willing to start listening to things that feel a little uncomfortable to get to that place, right? There's some discomfort in growth.
Discomfort in growth. I love that. That's a really powerful statement. Wow. Actually, so speaking of social media, we're living in a culture where people are self-diagnosing themselves with things like ADHD on, let's say, TikTok. I understand, the pull to do that. What do you think about that?
Well, because there's so much information out there, it's hard to not engage in all of that. You can take free ADHD tests. Some of them aren't very reliable, some of them are, but there's so much access to information online. Same thing. It's like, in some ways, I think it's really great. One of the reasons I put together a free ADHD quiz, and I used real questions from some of the specialists that I admire and follow. So I didn't just make up the questions on my own, for example. But the reason I did that was because I have clients in Australia and in the UK who are waiting a year and a half to 2 years to even be seen by a specialist to determine if they have ADHD. So for people like that, it's really a great tool. They can take a quiz that can give them a pretty good idea as to whether or not this is something that they have. I don't even want to say that they're struggling with, because not everyone's struggling with it. But then there are a lot of people that then, are in the United States. It would be easy to go get evaluated, but they're just wanting information. I think people know that they're struggling, and so they want answers. The reason I don't have a problem with people self-diagnosing is because we do such a terrible job in the medical community of diagnosing ADHD properly. So it's especially missed in women. It's missed in adults. So some interesting information is the DSM that we're on right now is the DSM-5. So the DSM gives us all of the information. Doctors use that to determine how to properly evaluate someone for a diagnosis. So ADHD example, they're using that DSM to determine, does this person meet the criteria? Well, the DSM-5 for ADHD only goes up to age 16. So if you were to go into your doctor's office, it doesn't matter if it's a primary care or a psychiatrist who's evaluating you for ADHD, the criteria that they've been given is meant for teenagers. Nobody's really talking about this. And so they're asking you questions about childhood behavior and hyperactivity. And about 18 of those, they're looking at 18 different behaviors. The problem with that is that, especially for women, but this can be true for men too, there's not always a lot of behaviors with ADHD. ADHD exists in the mind. So if you're not hyperactive, if you did well in school, if you're not someone who's chronically late, or incredibly impulsive and interrupting people, then you're probably going to walk away without a true ADHD diagnosis, and maybe you'll be diagnosed with anxiety or depression. So we do a terrible job diagnosing, and it's also missed quite commonly with women because we're really good at masking. It's also missed because if you're willing to do twice as much work for half the reward, like you're just struggling to keep up, but nobody can really see that, right? Or you're not hyper, then it's probably going to be missed in an ADHD evaluation.
Yes. That's really fascinating that the DSM-5 is using criteria that is only up to age 16. I mean,
it used to be thought of as a childhood disorder. So years ago, they even believed that females couldn't have ADHD. So we've come a long way since then, but we still do a terrible job. So again, it's like, this is why also a lot of times adults who are diagnosed as children will really believe that they grew out of ADHD. Maybe they were hyper as a child and they're not hyper anymore. They focus better now, so they think, I don't have ADHD anymore. But you don't grow out of ADHD. You grow out of your childhood symptoms, and they might start to manifest into adult symptoms. So like if you were restless as a child and a little bit hyperactive, as an adult, that might manifest into being a workaholic and having a hard time just sitting quietly. But adults are so busy now. It's like everybody's working so much and we're online that a lot of times adults just chalk that up to, well, I'm just busy. You know, all adults are this way. Nobody can relax. Everybody's busy. People can't unwind. This is just life. Everybody feels this way. So there's a lot of reasons that ADHD is missed. And overall, it's just because there's not a great understanding of what ADHD really is. Dr. William Dodson says 93% of psychiatrists today don't know how to properly treat ADHD. 50% of pediatricians wouldn't even know how to properly evaluate someone for ADHD. So it's a problem.
Oh my gosh.
It's a problem when it comes to truly detecting ADHD in children and adults.
Yeah. Well, okay, so this brings up a great point because I wanted to ask you, I have a relative, she is in her mid-30s, and she went in to get to take a ADHD test, and she was told she didn't have it. So she left just feeling confused and not understanding why. And it's like, okay, well, first of all, how often are the tests wrong? And second of all, what's next for her?
Did they explain to her why they didn't think that she had it?
So she told me that when she took the test, she was in a quiet room with no distractions. And at first, she did say that she did notice her mind wandering at times, but her perfectionist drive kicked in, and she knew she wanted to ace it. So it's like she was able to override whatever kind of wandering, and then she walked away. She walked away, with them saying, no, you don't have it. But she feels like in her day-to-day life, she's not really ever in a room with, quiet. She has children. She works, in a hospital. So she is constantly around stimulation. So she's like, okay, but I'm constantly around stimulation. And when I am around stimulation, I feel like I can't focus and I'm struggling. So am I just bad at life? Like, what do I do?
That's an interesting evaluation. I don't know exactly what they had her do because I'm used to evaluations that are much more in-depth, just asking you questions about, how you think about things, how you emotionally react to things, like tendencies that you have. There's lots of different, I'm sure, methods out there. But, sometimes we try to get fancy. And so what I think I hear you saying is that she hyper-focused. And when we hyper-focus, we can get engaged and stay engaged. That's when our superpowers turn on. And so there's 5 different things that really engage the ADHD brain, but one of them is challenge, one of them is urgency, right? And so if she really felt something like that, like you said, like she really wanted to ace this test, she wanted to make sure that she did a good job, I could see one of those being engaged as she's taking the test. And as soon as your hyperfocus turns on, you're superhuman. You can get things done twice as fast as the average person. So even if I'm at home with a bunch of kids, if my hyperfocus turns on, I can just work for 8 hours. I forget to eat. I forget to go to the restroom. It's like I am just locked in. So that's what it sounds like might have happened. And so, that wouldn't be a good evaluation.
Yeah.
If that is the case.
And it was done by a psychiatrist, and you said 93% of them, don't.
That's what I mean. Yeah, I can't speak to what happened there, but you don't know. You don't know if psychiatrists, he might be using the most up-to-date, effective way to evaluate ADHD, or he might have created his own version that he thinks will work better. We just don't know because who knows? But if I were her, I would go get a second opinion.
Okay.
Because that's the other thing is ADHDers are very intuitive. They're very smart. And so when you read things and it starts to click and make sense. This is why I don't have a big problem with people self-evaluating. It's true, or self-diagnosing. It's true that some of them might be wrong. They might have just experienced trauma in their lives. Sometimes I feel like at the end of the day, that doesn't matter unless they're getting prescribed stimulant medication. In that case, they would need a proper evaluation and diagnosis anyways. But it's like a lot of the same tools will work if you're having some of these different problems, if it's trauma-induced or it's actually ADHD. But this is true, I don't really have that much more faith in the medical community actually than I do, especially ADHD women really understanding themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
which is a shame. But
Yeah, my answer to that is just advocate for yourself. Go get a second opinion. If you want to try medication, go to someone you know, first of all, has ADHD themselves, really understands ADHD, so they can do a proper evaluation. There's a huge difference, in my opinion. And I have ADHD. All 7 of my children are neurodivergent. My husband's on the spectrum. So when you have lived experience, it just doesn't compare to a doctor who is not neurodivergent at all and is just studying the DSM. It's not the same. So you have to kind of search far and wide for someone who deals with deals with this themselves, really understands medication well, and has different ways. Like the psychiatrist I have out here, she never just checks just for ADHD. So when she's doing her full comprehensive evaluation, she's looking for OCD, autism, and ADHD all at the same time, because there's a lot of overlap. And if you have ADHD, there's a 60% likelihood that you'll have a comorbid condition, a 40% likelihood you'll have a second comorbid condition. So autism it's very commonly missed, and it's also very common to have ADHD and autism. Autism is also misdiagnosed all the time as OCD and depression. And there's just all of this going on here. So if you're just looking for one, you might be missing other things that are going on. Like maybe she has ADHD and OCD. Do we know? I mean, we want to be looking at the entire picture, not just looking for one thing when it comes to neurodivergence.
Yes, I agree. And I think that is a struggle with the medical community in general. It's like if you go to a foot doctor, it's like they're only allowed to look at your foot,
Right.
But I'll be like, well, my foot may hurt, but my knee kind of hurts too. And she's like, no, I'm not allowed to look at your knee. It's against the law. I'm like, what?
But if you're seeing a psychiatrist, you want to see someone who specializes in neurodivergence. And if they really specialize in neurodivergence, they understand that. They understand comorbidity. They understand autism the same way they understand ADHD. They can identify both. They understand the role that OCD can play and how autism looks different than OCD. These are just common problems I see in my office, just as a behavioral coach, that these things are intertwined and there's misdiagnoses. I'll have clients that it's so obvious to me when they walk in my office that they don't just have ADHD, they have autism as well. And they've been diagnosed with depression and ADHD or OCD and ADHD.
Yeah. It's a lot of layers.
It's a lot of layers, and I think it just takes a lot of lived experience on top of understanding the diagnosis itself to be able to properly evaluate. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah.
So I want to just back up for a minute. Neurodivergence is a word we hear a lot, but I haven't always understood exactly what it means. Can you define it for us?
Sure. Well, I'm going to ADHD define it for you, which means I'm using my own words. But neurodivergent is just a word we use for someone whose brain is not neurotypical. So most of the population has a neurotypical brain. We know that ADHD, for example, at least 10 to 12% of the population has ADHD. So neurotypical is going to be everybody else. But with neurodivergence, we're also going to include autism. So autism and ADHD have a neurodivergent neurological system. So that means, for example, if you're neurotypical and you have a neurological system that operates on importance and reward, you can move forward and just get something done because the task in front of you is important. It needs to be done. That's how neurotypical people operate. This is why many neurotypical people might refer to someone with ADHD as being lazy, right? Or why don't you just try harder or focus? Because they're able to operate their brain that way. Their neurological system is wired completely different. Now, if you have ADHD or if you have autism, you just have a different neurological system. The way it's wired, the way it processes information, the way it understands everything, from the way that they learn to relationships to what engages their brain. Now, there is a lot of overlap between autism and ADHD, but there's also stark differences as well. So just when it comes to ADHD specifically, the way that we learn and get our brain engaged, if we try to do that the way a neurotypical person does, which is what we're trying to do in school and in the workplace, we're going to usually fail because we can stare at something, know what needs to be done, and we can't figure out how to get our brain engaged and to just do it. That's part of what causes us to feel broken or really struggle to understand ourselves and why things seem so easy for everybody else and not us. Now, as soon as we have a teacher or instructor or coach that's neurodivergent also, we feel so seen and heard. That person gives us a different way to work. They give us different motivators. They teach us more visually. And all of a sudden, everything's clicking and we think, wow, like I'm on top of the world. We feel smarter. We feel more successful. And the only thing that changed is somebody who understood our brain was teaching us instead of somebody who didn't understand our brain. So it's really just the difference between two operating systems.
Wow. Okay, great. Question about stress. When stress hits hard, what does that feel like physiologically in an ADHD wired nervous system?
Well, I would say that, I think everybody likes to run from negative emotions. We like to buffer. That's my word for avoiding our emotions. We turn to alcohol. We turn to drugs. We turn to, zoning out in front of Netflix or doom scrolling our phone. But ADHDers tend to not handle negative emotions well at all. They're very intense feelers, so they're jumping up and down much more intensely throughout the day than the average person. So it's an interesting question because I don't know that stress for me, as an ADHD woman, I don't know that would be my trigger. I tend to handle bigger situations quite well. I can juggle a lot of things. That's why there's so many memes online, like car accident, got this. There's a fire, I'm like calmly walking over there to put it out. But someone cuts me off in traffic, I'm losing my mind. And ADHDers are known for that, for making a big deal out of the little things and a little deal out of the big things. So I personally, I can only speak for myself, but I've seen this with my clients too. I handle stress quite well. What I don't handle well is boredom, the feeling of rejection, when I feel like I've disappointed people, the idea that I'm not good enough because I didn't get the raise, I didn't get the job, the texting someone and they didn't text me back, and now, again, that's rejection. It's really those kinds of things that I think for ADHDers feel like stress more than the big stressful situations. I'm walking out like this, like I have a cape on when everyone else is stressed, but I'm crumbling in the everyday situations that other people are handling quite well.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating. I like your word buffer. To explain or to describe the concept of zoning out, reaching for a substance of some kind, and not really wanting to deal with those emotions. And yeah, it makes sense that, like you said, that ADHDers have this really intense feelings, really intense emotions. And then earlier, you were like, there's really high highs, there's really low lows.
I would even go as far as to say that, like, I usually thrive in stressful situations. My hyperfocus turns on and I'm like, I got this. I'm going to fix everybody's life and problems. But then where ADHDers feel something similar to what I think you're trying to get at with stress, like a lot of people crumble under stress, and that's what drives them to drink. ADHDers, it's more of feelings of inadequacy. So things are piling up. We feel unliked. We feel like we're not good enough. We feel like things aren't working out the way we want them to. And it piles up. A big part of ADHD, and I know you want to talk about this, but is the rejection sensitive dysphoria. And so that's the emotional dysregulation. That's the piece that really sinks ADHDers. And so that's probably the equivalency to stress, is the I'm not good enough line that we're constantly repeating to ourselves.
Yes. Oh, yes. I'm glad you brought up rejection sensitivity disorder. That's something I started to learn once I started listening to your podcast. That wasn't a term that was familiar to me. Can you explain that more in depth?
Absolutely. And I want to shout it from the rooftops because so many people haven't heard of RSD. It is relatively newer information. Dr. William Dodson is the first one who ever started writing on it. And I had the pleasure of interviewing him and having him talk in detail about it and really teach me the ins and outs of RSD, because traditionally we thought of ADHD as being a disorder of distractibility and lack of focus and motivation, but it's just as much emotional dysregulation as it is anything else. And so really, Dr. Dodson was citing another doctor who said if he could really kind of go back and narrow it down to two things, it would be distractibility and emotional dysregulation. That is a huge piece. And when women hear RSD, they think, oh, I think I have this. So RSD, think of it as fitting under that umbrella of emotional dysregulation. It's not necessarily a separate diagnosis. It's a part of ADHD. And rejection sensitive dysphoria is the extreme, intense emotion and reaction to the idea that you have been rejected. So nobody likes to feel rejected, whether you have ADHD or not. But when you have ADHD, it's at an entirely different level, and it can come on so quickly. It can be triggered by teasing, by constructive feedback, by the idea that you failed to meet someone's expectations or you failed to meet your own. It's usually perceived rejection. So you could, in your business, you could hear lots of positive feedback and everyone's so happy with you and you did a great job. And then one person makes a constructive comment and you spiral for 3 weeks, keeps you up at night. You can't sleep. I had one client who actually, this is a true story. She had all of these 5-star reviews. One girl gave her like 3.5-star review. And she was about to close up shop and go do something else. She couldn't handle the rejection of I had worked so hard and why doesn't she like me? And she's probably sending business somewhere else and I'm not going to start my next class, because it takes hold and it really can mirror a major mood disorder. So you want to think of ADHD as being on a spectrum the same way that autism is. So a lot of women will say RSD runs their life. It is the most 2/3 of all adults say that RSD is the main symptom they deal with ADHD. It is running the show. It is being triggered randomly. It's very unpredictable. So maybe one day you might be able to handle constructive feedback and then the next day you can't. It just comes on. And so this is a huge struggle for ADHDers because it's ruining relationships. It's ruining their position at work. They can't handle the rejection. But usually it's perceived. It's not meant to be interpreted that way. But even when you talk about this with people who have ADHD, they still say, okay, but then what do I do about it? Now I understand it, but how do I stop it? Because some people can keep it internal. So you can't tell their RSD has been triggered, but inside they are spiraling. Some really lash out, or around certain people they'll lash out, slamming doors, saying unkind things, really just kind of what looks like an adult tantrum. Women, I'm sure we've all been there once or twice before. And then if you've been married, you've been there before, that's for sure. And then for some, this isn't as common, but some of my clients will say they can't even remember what they said, they just saw red. And they don't even remember exactly how they behaved. But that's how intense it can come on so quickly. We call it an episode because it's so extreme.
Oh my goodness, an episode. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds very debilitating, like you were saying.
It's painful. Fortunately, I just don't really feel like it shows up in my life very much at all anymore. But in my 20s, I was like the walking poster child for RSD. It would feel like I was being clawed from the inside out. It was painful. I had no control over it. And then there's a lot of shame associated with RSD. ADHDers experience a lot of shame because as they start to kind of come back down from this intense emotional spiral, they feel a lot of shame because they know that the way they reacted, even if they tried to not show it, they shut down, they didn't show up, they stopped answering text messages. They know that it was bigger than the situation warranted, but they didn't feel as though they had any control over it. It's very impulsive. It's the impulsive part of ADHD. So that part is very debilitating. And I think that is also one of the reasons that someone with ADHD might turn to substances and buffer, because the emotional intensity is so extreme and it's so painful. It's the shame afterwards that's hard to live with. And what do we do when we feel shame? That's one of the heaviest emotions, right? We want to escape it. We look for a buffer.
Oh, yes, absolutely. When I was struggling with alcohol, shame was, I actually use the word all the time, like debilitating. And I felt like I was covered in it. and it made me want to crawl out of my skin.
Exactly.
And it's such a barrier to getting help and finding a solution to overcome it. And so it's very difficult. It is a very difficult emotion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's heavy.
What are some of the solutions to help with those RSD episodes and symptoms?
Well, this is what I work with my clients on a lot. I have a rapid reframe response model that I teach them, and I show them how to work through those. But some of the simple things that I can give you right here is just, one, you want to read about RSD. You want to understand that it's your wiring. It's not your fault. It's not your fault you were given a different wiring than most of the people around you. And so you were never given an instruction manual. You don't know how it works. So there's a lot of misunderstanding of oneself that I have anger issues. I'm just so sensitive. I can't control myself. I'm a bad person. I take everything personally. I ruin all of my relationships. These are the kinds of things that people who struggle with RSD say to themselves. And so recognizing that none of that is true. You just have a wiring that you didn't know that you had. And so you listened when people said, "Oh gosh, you're so sensitive. What is wrong with you? Why are you taking this so personally?" You don't know why. It's like, I don't know, but it sure felt painful. The other thing is giving yourself permission to have your thoughts and feelings, because there's a difference between lashing out and really expressing anger and just feeling it. So I'll always tell my clients, don't say things to yourself like, "I know this is so stupid, but I know this is so petty, but," like, stop shaming yourself for impulsive thoughts that you can't always control. Be kind to yourself. Show grace. Be curious about it. I'm human. I'm allowed to feel this way. I'm allowed to have these thoughts and feelings. And let me think about why. Like, that's interesting that my brain just went right to that conclusion. What happened there? Start being curious, as though you would do that for a friend. Like, let's ask some questions. Investigate it. Be willing to take time to pause and investigate the meaning of what happened instead of letting your brain just jump right to meaning. And that's what RSD does. It just takes off without you, and it jumps to this meaning that really probably isn't true. The other thing is, nobody can get someone out of an RSD episode. So if you're a parent who has a child that acts this way, if your spouse acts this way, the big mistake that one will make if they're working or talking to someone who has RSD is they'll try to calm them down, or they'll want to have a rational conversation. They'll try to talk to them, and it's just not the time to do that. Someone who's in the middle of an episode needs to remove themselves and be alone with their thoughts. Even if you were in the middle of an RSD episode and I was apologizing, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," that would still flare your temper if you're in the middle of an episode. That person needs to go be alone with their thoughts and think through them. Nothing good will come from trying to talk them through it.
Oh, wow. And that, again, there's so much alignment with my work. I, as a gray area drinking coach, I teach my clients about noticing dysregulation and the difference between that emotional limbic brain, or sometimes called the animal brain, versus our logical brain. When our emotional brain takes over, our logical brain, I like to frame it as, it leaves the building.
Yes.
It's not there. And then you're totally running on that animal brain, that amygdala, and you don't have clarity. You can't make good decisions. And just saying calm down is not going to help the situation at all.
No, not at all. And that's why even usually an apology in that moment doesn't help, because once someone starts feeling rejection, if you apologize, they think you're just apologizing because you feel like you have to, you don't mean it. I mean, there's that person, if you wanted to use the example of left the building, they're not there to hear anything that you're saying. It will just trigger the episode more. So the person with RSD has to go be alone, give themselves permission to feel the way that they do, take time to think through their thoughts. And then when their brain is ready to think logically, I'll tell my clients, okay, we have an emotional regulation scale of 1 through 10. If you're over a 5, your only goal is to get below a 5. It's not to do the emotional regulation model that I teach them. It's not to have a conversation with someone. Your only job is to do whatever it is that helps you get regulated. Listen to a podcast, listen to music, go on a walk, be alone. And then once you're under a 5, now you can have the conversation. Now you can do your emotional regulation common model. The mistake a lot of, especially ADHDers, because we're so impulsive, we make is we might be the ones that keep arguing, or we might try to make logical sense of our brain when we're completely dysregulated. So we want to be able to say, where am I on that scale? Am I over a 5? Am I a 6 or 7? If that's the case, your only goal is to get below a 5 so that you can start working on yourself.
Yeah. Having a scaling like that 1 to 10, that's really powerful. How do people know if they're over a 5 or under a 5?
Well, you're usually speaking in absolutes. You always do this. You never do that. Your heart rate has raised, or you're very easily triggered. You feel yourself. You can kind of feel when you're overstimulated. You're just a little bit on edge. You don't have as much tolerance for sensory input. You might even feel like you want to start arguing. And ADHDers love to argue, by the way, because there's a lot of dopamine in like potentially winning the argument. Like I've never backed down from a confrontation. I mean, now that I'm old, and almost 50, it's like I don't like confrontation anymore. But most of my life I was like, ooh, an argument, I can't wait. Let's like dive in there, because there's just a lot of dopamine there. But when you're above a 5, you want to do those things. You just want to make a comment. You might want to hurt someone's feelings, or you might just say something that's not very kind. You don't feel that you have control over your brain. You can start to feel that you don't totally trust yourself to be able to smile or be nice, or it feels like you're masking really hard to have to do so. So when you're regulated, you feel peace and calm inside. It's not just how you're acting on the outside. You don't have to try so hard to act that way. You're not masking. But inside, you can think logically, and you could compliment somebody when they walk in the door instead of, I don't care that they're here. There's like a difference when you're feeling irritated and frustrated. So 5 is kind of that place where it's like, okay, if you're at a 5, like any little thing could now push you over the edge. If it's too loud in here, if the lights are too bright, if someone makes a comment that you weren't expecting. And so it's like, let's just get under a 5 so that you can handle sensory input and real life as it's happening. You can't really handle it very well when you're over a 5.
Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So speaking of RSD still, is RSD something specific to ADHD only?
Yes, they think so. I mean, I'm sure they've finished the testing now. When I talked to Dr. Dodson a handful of years ago, they were still finalizing the tests. So they were pretty sure that RSD was associated only with ADHD, and it's generally being taught that way, that yes.
Okay. Because when I've heard you describe it on your show, it made me think of some abandonment trauma that resonates with my life. But luckily, through my journey, through overcoming alcohol and learning all these nervous system regulation skills, it's not really debilitating anymore, but it was, and it just seemed like there were some commonalities. But that's really interesting that it is specific.
Yes, but there are commonalities. I mean, this is why like trauma symptoms will mirror our ADHD symptoms. And the other thing is that if you are going through trauma or have had trauma, or you're experiencing any kind of abandonment, or going through a difficult phase of life, you lost your job, you broke up with your boyfriend, then your RSD episodes will last a lot longer, and they'll come more often. So the healthier you can get your brain, the healthier you feel as a person, and the healthier your life looks, then the more distance you'll have in RSD frequency. And if it is triggered, you're able to get over it in 10 minutes instead of 10 hours.
Yeah.
So trauma does definitely play a role in ADHD. I don't believe that trauma causes ADHD, but you can think of trauma as almost like a light switch if you already have ADHD. Because I've had adult clients who say, I knew I had ADHD when I was younger, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. Like I was kind of hyper, but I still did pretty well in school. I would interrupt, but it just wasn't, and they were diagnosed, as a child, but they were functioning pretty well. And then a life event happened that just took them out, and they're like, now I can't even get through work. So I like to think of it almost as like a switch turns on that really activates maybe symptoms that were under control or weren't running their lives. So absolutely, trauma plays a huge role in ADHD.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I like that analogy of the light switch. That's really helpful.
Yeah. So it's not like it just showed up as an adult and you didn't have it before, but maybe some of the debilitating symptoms, because it is a spectrum. There are some people who really struggle with RSD and some people who know that it's there, but it's not that big of a problem. There's people who really struggle in school, and there's those who have ADHD that didn't really struggle in school. So there's those with ADHD that they don't have a friend and they're just too much for people. And then there's others that like have a lot of friends and they blend in quite well, and that hasn't been a problem for them. So we can't look at just one thing and say this is ADHD, but it is very common to have ADHD, struggle with some things, go through trauma, and now you're struggling with a lot of things.
Yeah. Okay. And again, it goes back to like a lot of layers. It's a complicated topic, and there's clearly a lot of nuance.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What's one of the most common myths about the nervous system in neurodivergent people that keeps them feeling stuck or feeling that shame?
Well, I think it's that it's broken, that you'll hear, well, I can't do that because I have ADHD, or my ADHD keeps me from being able to follow through. My ADHD keeps me from being able to sit behind a desk and get things done. People will start blaming their ADHD for the problems that they're having in their life because they think their brain is broken. Mm-hmm. You know, whether we like it or not, the medical community defines it as a disorder, and that is because of the executive functioning deficits. So until your brain reaches maturity, which is usually age 25, the executive function age for a child, teenager, or even young adult is going to be about 3 years behind that of a neurotypical brain. But it eventually does catch up. And so for wherever there are deficiencies, there's also gifts. It's just that, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of times it's hard to access our gifts when we're swarming in what we feel is our deficiencies. But when we think that we have a disorder, it contributes to us showing up like we have a disorder. And this is what one of the main differences in the coaching I do with ADHD versus most ADHD coaches is most ADHD coaches start with executive function deficits. And so they teach you how to be more organized and follow through. I start with emotional regulation, because what I have found to be true with my clients is when they see themselves differently and they don't think of themselves as having a disorder, and they learn how to increase self-confidence, get rid of imposter syndrome, and they can start to make baby steps forward in ways that they hadn't before. They're managing their emotions, their relationships are getting better. They naturally are able to focus and be more consistent in their lives. And so I believe at the root of everything, even not being able to stay organized, is emotional dysregulation.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't agree more. And again, so many correlations with my line of work. I don't want to really focus so much at the prefrontal cortex, that logical brain that we're talking about. I want them to get into their, limbic brain, their emotional brain. And for my line of work, that's the physiology of the things,
right.
And it sounds like
that's where the impairment is. That's what it's regulating themselves, how they see themselves, what they believe they're capable of. And everybody struggles being good at certain things, whether they have ADHD or not. And so, I tell my clients, okay, well, ADHD, having that diagnosis is actually an advantage, because at least we know, we have an instruction manual for how your brain works and what gets it engaged. Everybody's struggling with something. But yeah, I think it can be really damaging to think of yourself as having a disorder. So I definitely throw that language out. You don't have to believe you have a superpower, but can we just start with, I just have a different neurological system.
Yeah.
That, by the way, works perfectly well when you know how to use it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I agree about the word disorder. I don't like a lot of labels for things. I talk about this a lot in my line of work. I don't like, for me, alcoholic. That's just not a word that resonates with me. It kind of has the same yuck as the disorder. And, I have a phrase I use a lot, our brains believe what we tell it. So if we keep repeating that we have a disorder, it can lead us to feeling stuck. And then we're wiring pathways in our brain that are constantly, feeding that.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And that's why this is just a little off topic, but I've never been to an AA meeting, but I've always had an issue with the fact that they have to stand up and say, I'm such and such, and I'm an alcoholic. Just with my line of work, I'm like, I just don't think that can be good for someone. I know some people who go to AA meetings almost every day. I'm like, you're saying that out loud every day? They're like, yeah, you have to admit it. I'm like, it just seems like you should tell that story once and then move on.
Oh my
but
gosh.
that's how I feel. I don't know a lot about AA.
Yeah. No, you're preaching to the choir over here. That did not resonate for me. I could not go the AA path. I absolutely tried it in the early days before I had all of this knowledge now about the nervous system and the brain. And I was just like, I can't do this. I cannot spend every day for the rest of my life standing up in front of people saying I'm an alcoholic. And now to me, it almost seems, maybe silly is not the word, but like it doesn't resonate, pure and simple. Alcohol's been out of my body now for well over 5 years. And I like to say that I drank in the gray, but my forever decision to stop is very black and white. You know,
Right.
I know I'm never going back. And then the powerlessness, you know, that's another word they use. And I'm like, I am the opposite of powerless. I have so much power in my, you know, everyday life. And it's so, yeah, like, fortunately in the alcohol-free community, there are so many different spaces now. And I tell people, like, I don't want to ever put down or shame AA or say it's good or bad. It's like, if it works for you, go all day.
Right.
But it didn't work for me, and it's not working for a lot of people. And so yeah, sounds like we're definitely on the same
Maybe they
page.
could just have like a different introduction.
Yeah, exactly. And in the last couple of years, I think I went to like 1 or 2 meetings just because I was out somewhere and I happened to be there, and I was like, oh, let me just pop in. And I said, hi, I'm Kristin, and I stopped. Like I'm here, but I'm not going to, you know.
Well,
this
we've learned
is
so much
online.
about the brain. AA has been around for a while, so we
Yeah.
just have to like keep up with
Yeah.
what we've learned about the brain. Because I've heard a lot of great things about AA, just having, you know, accountability partners and things like that. It's just that in my line of work, what I have found to be true is that what you believe about yourself is what you'll give yourself. And the way that we talk about ourselves, in fact, every single cell in our body responds to every word we speak and every thought that we think. And so that's why our thoughts matter so much. And that's why even with ADHD, we can undo so much of what we think about ourselves just by completely changing how we constantly talk to ourselves every single day and what we believe our limitations are and aren't.
Yes, exactly. And I'm very like forward focused and I'm solution focused. I don't want to dwell on the past anymore.
Definitely not.
I'm like, okay, let's focus on today, and you know, what skills can I apply and how can we go forward?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that one.
Great. So you're a huge advocate for coaching over therapy for neurodivergence. I have seen the effectiveness in coaching in the gray area drinking space as compared to traditional therapy or AA, like we're talking about. Why do you think coaching is becoming more popular?
Because it works. It works really well. I mean, if you have the right coach, I think one of the reasons coaching wasn't popular is because it's not necessarily regulated. So someone can go out and get a coaching certificate for $1,000 and 1 week of training. And that's a problem. That's why people have to be vetted really well. And so do doctors. I had quite extensive training, you know, for over a year, and it was quite expensive. And I also specialize in things that I have a lot of life experience in. And I went to all the doctors and therapists to get help for my family, to get help for myself. And I had something to compare it to. You know, I did the therapy and the counseling after I got divorced. And then I did coaching after I thought I had fixed all the things that needed to be fixed. And the difference was night and day in the transformation that I had. So if you have a really good coach, and part of that is great tools that are implementable that you can use. You're not just talking, you're not just venting, you're not continuing to talk about the past. I don't find a lot of value in talking about the past, and we do that a lot in therapy. And I'm really not wanting to knock therapists. I know that there are great specialized therapists out there. I know some people do a really great job, but when it comes to neurodivergence specifically, I think they don't need therapy. There's not something wrong with them. Now, if they've been through trauma or something, that's one thing, but even retelling your trauma over and over, it just brings back the trauma into your life over and over. And so in my office, we're always talking about, okay, what do we want to do about it? What are we going to do about it? We're forward focused, and we're using skills and tools to reframe even what we used to think happened. I mean, the past is just a compilation of all of our thoughts about what happened about the past. So you can even rewrite the past. And I don't mean gaslight yourself. I mean, really have a better understanding of what other people were going through, why they may have acted the way that they did. Were they just confused? How did I show up? What was my lack of knowledge then compared to now? You can rewrite some of the things that you believed happened when you have a better understanding. But even a lot of times when you understand that, it's like, okay, but what am I going to do about it? And so having control over your mind and the way that you experience the world, the way you experience yourself, how quickly your mind jumps to judgment instead of taking time to slow down and interpret the meaning, that's complete and total freedom to be able to choose how you feel in any given moment, despite how somebody's behaving or something that they said. And I haven't completely mastered this because if you get me in traffic, I am not a nice person. But in a lot of other areas in my life, my relationships that were difficult, for forgiveness, for divorce and things that happened, there was substance abuse in my marriage and my family, being able to just really let that go. It's like forgiveness is a gift that you give yourself, right? It's just like something you do for you because you're the only one that has to live with those feelings. Your feelings can't jump out of your body and into anyone else's. And so when we are able to release all of that and just show up, like we're not like white knuckling our way through it. We really just feel the way we want to feel. That is complete freedom. And especially people who have ADHD who are such intense feelers and so easily offended by things because of RSD, to not let that have any power over you. Like nobody else can make you upset and RSD isn't running the show anymore. I mean, you feel like a completely different person. And my experience is that most of my clients have been in therapy for 2+ years. And they just haven't experienced that kind of freedom, especially neurodivergent individuals that they get from behavioral coaching.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I couldn't agree more. For me, along my journey, therapy was helpful, 100%. Helped with the mental health piece. And I was fortunate to find some therapists that taught me skills and not just, rehashing the past and things like that. But the therapy didn't help me stop drinking. It was the coaching. Once I enlisted a coach for help, everything changed. And it's mind-blowing to think that shift that was created and, focusing on the here and now, focusing on the body, focusing on what is happening in my life, learning tools from her every week, applying them every single day, and then it added up, created that new neural pathway. And that, to me, is what led to the freedom.
Exactly. I know. And I now in my coaching business, because ADHDers, they are going through so much in addiction. Like I have teenagers that come to me who are engaging in self-harm. I have people who are severely depressed. I have people who are overcoming trauma. Once you are able to help people really understand how to do this, it's like behavioral coaching can help all of those things. And so that's what's really great is that a lot of times people think, oh, coaching, that's life skills. They don't think, oh, coaching will help me stop drinking. Coaching will help me stop looking at pornography. Coaching will actually help me stop these behaviors. And it does, because emotional dysregulation is at the root of all of that. And if you can fix that, the actions, I call it the action line, the addiction, the behaviors that we have will naturally stop as well.
Yes, exactly. So true. Oh my gosh. That was great. If someone is interested in working with you, where can they find you?
Well, thank you for asking. I appreciate that question. So I have a website, jherisouth.com. You can go there to get more information like testimonials. I have some free things there. So I work with teens, I work with young adults, I work with adults, I work with marriages. So but I specialize in working in neurodivergence. And so I have a free ADHD quiz. I have an RSD webinar. I work one-on-one, and I have group coaching programs as well. And so I offer free consults, and you can find that on my website, or you can also find me at Jheri South online as well. Yeah.
Yay.
Thank you for asking.
You have so much to offer. That's so exciting. And I'm really, really happy to share your talents and your offerings with my audience, and really, really appreciate you coming today. It was so amazing to meet you.
You bet. It was nice to meet you too. This has been great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.